We are super excited to have Rebecca Stob from Evensun Health today to talk to us about some of what's going on in the individual market. So, for context, it's been kind of a rough year for the individual market payers. Listening to earnings calls this past quarter, almost all of them have said they're trying to trim their sales a little bit, control their growth, and aim for profitability. And I think the story sort of gets even more fascinating when you zoom in on states and even individual counties and try and understand who's trying to grow, who might have been mispriced and is in for some unexpected growth, and where member shopping will take a big difference. And so, like I said, we have the perfect guest today to talk about that with Rebecca. Rebecca, I was hoping, number one, you could kind of just help us with like some context and say, at a high level, what factors does a payer kind of think about when they're thinking about pricing and product offerings getting ready for open enrollment?
It really starts, hi, it really starts with monitoring your profitability by meta level and down to the county on an ongoing basis. So what pairs will do, will look at their post risk adjustment profitability, which is always an exercise in estimation because the risk adjustment is not final until after a benefit year. But you'll look at the emerging experience, the emerging risk scores by meta level, and what that is going to do for your profitability by county, and then determine for counties and rating areas where you have an issue either on the claim side, maybe your contracts aren't good, so you'll go after different provider groups to get better contracts, or look at your network design, or also you might be mispriced from a rate perspective, and so you'll adjust your relative rates to in the different geographic areas. Um, so that happens. That's an ongoing conversation that happens at most payers, and really starting the year before you're setting your rate. So now payers are looking at their emerging 2025 experience and predicting what membership they're going to get for 2026, so that they can predict what they may need to adjust in their rates for 2027 or product design. And some big decisions that will happen, that particularly Centene and Molina have made, are to not offer bronze plans in some areas where that's an option. Some states will allow you to do that. Some states will not allow you to do that. So that's kind of the ongoing discussions that peers are having as they're preparing for the rate filing season upcoming. But of course, the policy landscape is constantly shifting. So monitoring that and evaluating what options you have to target profitability in certain areas, um, as well as your company's strategic goals. So for a company like Oscar, where they've been focused on membership growth, they may not be as concerned with you know, the level of profitability in some areas where they're wanting to target growth. But then other payers that have seen a lot of membership growth and maybe have seen it be unprofitable are then more looking to adjust their pricing to achieve that profitability and alignment with the meta levels and the geographic areas.
That makes sense. It feels like to me, if you're a payer, it's like a really complicated dance because you're trying to figure out, okay, where do I want to be in terms of pricing position and meta levels? We have, some set of return shoppers versus, or, returning re-enrollments versus new shoppers. The risk adjustment is a big question. Are there any other factors that payers are thinking about as they go into those pricing questions?
Sure. You're always, since every year is a different set of people. There's a lot of churn in the population. You really want to drill down into the profitability and see whether it is a risk adjustment issue. Maybe if you get a lot of new members, you don't have history on their diagnoses, and they take a little while to access the network and have those visits where they get their conditions coded for risk adjustment. So holding on to those members for a few years, even if they're unprofitable in the first year, may be a good strategy. Another thing that you want to look at with those existing members is, do you have members that are on meta levels? If you adjust your relative pricing of the meta levels, can you induce people to shift into a meta level that may be more appropriate for their risk? So if you have, a high risk population that's buying bronze plans, if you eliminate bronze plans, or if you are able to, if the state allows you to set those rates for those plans, or kind of adjust your bronze plan offerings to uh, incentivize them to move to a silver or gold. Um, and it really depends on, if they're a heavily subsidized CSR member where they're getting that generous CSR benefit. And you may want them to be on the silver plan. But then in states where um, they have aggressive CSR loading, like for example, Texas, which mandates a very large load to the silver plan for the CSR members, then the gold plan may be a better option. And so you have to take into account what is allowed by your regulator, what the relative competition is doing, and where your population is in terms of the meta level, and how that their relative risk affects their profitability from a claims perspective and a risk adjustment perspective. So it is a very complicated dance.
Yes, it's a very complicated dance, and you're playing it with imperfect information because you're submitting those rates without knowing where your competitors are going to come in.
That's true. Uh, if you've been in a state for, been filing rates in a state for a long time, sometimes you have a sense of what your competitors are doing, and you may be monitoring your competitors' financial performance, because that's another important factor. If your competitor is losing a lot of money, you're you're going to expect them to have a higher rate increase. And then you may also expect that if you get that population, you may also be in that situation of losing money on the membership that shifts from that other payer to you. So really having, and then some carriers in some states have kind of a go-to playbook of what they like to do. Sometimes United is notorious for dipping in and out of states and areas, and then Centina and Molina will have kind of a consistent playbook that they use across states. Like for instance, not offering the bronze plans when they're not able to price those appropriately to the the relative profitability. So I think that's why in Texas you're seeing um, plans not wanting to um, get those bronze members, or trying to incentivize the members to choose gold instead of bronze. Uh, but in other states where the silver loading isn't as high, so you're not putting your silver rates up as much, then and you can price your bronze plan closer to the silver, um, then the relative profitability can work out so that bronze is more is you're indifferent between the members picking the bronze plan and the silver plan.
That makes sense. So I want to zoom into a couple of regions in a second, but one more kind of macro question for you. So I talked about this a little bit in the lead-in, but Molina and Centene and United all talked about saying like we're pricing to not grow next year. Oscar said Oscar continues to sort of look for growth. It's interesting to hear those three national payers talking about not wanting to be the cheapest. Someone has to be the lowest priced in the
Right.
market. And so I'm curious, maybe it's on a regional level or I'm not sure what it looks like, but how would you kind of characterize the different strategies and who's gonna fill in the gap for the Centene Molinas of the world who are trying to not be the lowest price?
Right. It's very variable. Well, although Centene and Molina and United may have said that, they still may end up the lowest plan. I don't think that the percentage of counties where Centene is the lowest silver or bronze has changed that much. That so it seems that other payers have kind of in their markets have matched their rate increases somewhat. And then Oscar, we do see that there are more areas where it is the lowest cost option, but yeah, it's in some areas it's going to be the regional provider sponsored health plans that are going to be the lowest option, and they may get a lot of membership that they maybe weren't anticipating because they didn't have as many resources to do as much monitoring or modeling of the potential outcomes. Um, but then in some cases, like in the case of Dallas County that we're going to talk about, the the prior lowest price carrier that had a share of the market, a high share of the market, ended up raising their rates more, and so now Centene actually is. So it's really it varies a lot across the different areas. Um,
There's really some fascinating game theory that goes into it.
yeah, it's really a lot to keep track of and to try and predict. Um,
Well, let's talk through some geographies. So I know you had kind of pulled up a few geographies that were interesting. Where should we start?
yeah, if we start in I think I really wanted to zoom in on Dallas because Texas is one of the largest markets, and Dallas County itself has about 300,000 exchange enrollees, and it's kind of a microcosm of what is happening across different geographies. Um, and you know, uh, but Texas is one of the states that has probably the most aggressive mandated silver load. And so what that does is it makes the gold plan a cheaper option than the silver plan, even for some of those highly subsidized silver members. So you see more gold enrollment in states where the gold is priced above the silver. The action is really in the silver and the bronze, depending on whether the member has that CSR benefit or not. Um, uh, so that's kind of the story with Texas. Um, and then
And Texas
also
is a non-Medicaid expansion
is
state, right?
not a non-Medicaid expansion state. So all these dynamics are a little bit more muted in states where there is a Medicaid expansion because there's fewer of those highly subsidized CSR enrollees. There's not as high of a CSR load that's raising the price of the silver relative to the other metal levels. And then I think in those areas, you're going to see a lot more shift of people to the bronze plans. So being that lowest cost bronze is going to, um, you know, be a determining factor of whether you're getting that membership shift, or it can also lead to people dropping coverage because they really just can't afford that. The increase in the silver subsidy isn't enough to uh, offset the decrease in the tax credit from the enhanced APTC going away, because it's pretty dramatic for some of those members, above the CSR level, so above 200, the highly subsidized CSR level, the 200% FPL.
Yeah. When I was looking at the enrollment file, it seemed like Texas and Florida both have because of they have an expanded Medicaid, they have a huge number of people who are in that um, subsidized CSR bracket.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
So and then even states that haven't mandated that load in the past. For instance, Washington is one that I'm very familiar with. As a response to that enhanced APTC going away, they actually instituted quite a large CSR load and created a option of a gold plan that would be cheaper than the silver plan. So they're actually not even showing the silver plans to the members that don't qualify for the silver CSR plans. So that way that, for a lot of the subsidized members, that increase in the subsidy is offsetting the enhanced APTC going away. And they're also filling in with a state subsidy for their public auction cascade care plans. Um, so there are states that are, particularly the states with the state-based exchanges that are really taking actions that offset that uh, enhanced APTC going away and trying to fill it in with state money.
That makes sense. I'm curious what the distinction, do you see any sort of behavioral differences either on the payer or the shopper side between folks on the state-based exchange and folks who use the federal exchange?
I think that there are differences the state-based exchanges have a lot of flexibility to customize the shopping experience and what plans get presented to the members. Like I mentioned with the case of Washington, not even showing the silver plans uh, to those non CSR members. Really, I think they had a forced mapping of some of those non CSR members to that gold plan with the renewal. Um, so that shopping experience can really, uh, uh, affect consumer shopping behavior. Um, in terms of and so that it varies widely across the different payers. In some, in one state that the exchange actually shows off exchange plans as options. So that, that's a pretty big difference. One big difference that consumers are going to see if they don't qualify for any CSR or APTC um, in 2026 is the federal exchange is going to show the catastrophic plan options, which are not eligible for APTC being applied to them. Um, but typically, they're only available to the under 30 population. But in the it will be a lot more seamless for those um, non-subsidized members, either APTC or CSR. So if you're only getting a small amount of APTC and the catastrophic plan without any premium credit applied to it is cheaper than your bronze plan, or perhaps has a network that you prefer, um, that is going to, I think we're going to see a lot more enrollment in that catastrophic plan that I don't know that carriers were fully appreciating what that might do to their catastrophic plan enrollment. And the catastrophic plan is a separate pool for risk adjustment, so may that may be a surprise for some payers how much of that over 30 membership they get. It's not the
On
same
the
in the state-based exchanges. The state-based exchanges will not show the catastrophic plan over 30, and they make it very difficult for someone to get that hardship exemption and actually enroll. That information is not readily available.
Got it. That's good context. I think when I think about the catastrophic, I did some price shopping for my local market, which is DC, and the catastrophic and the cheapest browns were not that far from each other. I had to say I was under
Mm-hmm.
30, and so that was
Right.
probably which is not
Yeah,
true.
that's another big difference. The amount that the catastrophic plan is priced from the bronze plan varies a lot between markets. Some there's a pretty big discount, some there's barely any difference between the catastrophic plan and the bronze plan, and that really just all has to do with um, the experience of the carriers offering those catastrophic plans compared to the bronze plans, and if they're really seeing that um, better risk from enrolling that under 30 population that's not able to use subsidies.
Are most of the catastrophic plan carriers also on the exchange market, or are they kind of separate businesses typically?
Yeah, you I don't believe you can offer just a catastrophic plan. It you have to offer it in with your meta level plans. So
There's not any catastrophic specialists out there.
no.
Um, a question I've had, and this gets back to I think the pricing strategy, and feel free to like talk about this in a specific market or just more
Mhm.
generally, is how deterministic is having the lowest price plan into growing market share? Like, are people really price sensitive and they just tend to pick the cheapest, or do people do a good job of shopping and really kind of weigh the trade-offs?
So it really depends on uh it it depends on how big the gap is. So there are, a number of markets where there are carriers within, $5 to $10 per month in price of each other. And in that case, I think there is more shopping, in terms of whether there's a specific network, or reputation of a carrier. Uh, but then if they are pretty price sensitive if there's a large difference. But then the other dynamic in the states where there are a lot of very heavily subsidized members and is the availability of free plans. So if there are a number of free plans, um, then actually the lowest price option, like if you would pick the lowest price option and you're leaving subsidy on the table, um, you, that may not, you may want to maximize the amount of subsidy that you can apply. So it really just depends on where that $0 threshold is, which varies a lot varies continuously by FPL and by the ages that are involved. So um, yeah, I think there are a lot of factors involved in whether or not that lowest price, being the lowest price, is going to get you a lot of membership.
And where do renewals come in here? I'm not sure what the percentages are of like new to the marketplace and renewals, but my sort of sense from my friends who are on the marketplace is that like they get a renewal letter and
Right.
they
So
yeah.
it in terms of the renewals, if if you're on a $0 plan, you have a $0 premium after APTC, and then you renew onto a $0 plan. It's very high that people are going to stay with their carrier. And same if it's a small difference. It's really when the difference, the differences that people are seeing in their renewals now, where there's been a lot of shifts in the different the relative price of the carriers to that benchmark, and in addition with the EAPTC going away, that's why you're seeing a lot of reports of people getting their renewals and having just very, very dramatic increases in the premium that they are expected to, that's their responsibility, and that will tend to make them shop, you know, as it should, right?
Yeah, understandably so. So if
There's kind
are
of a
there
threshold. There's a threshold at which it will, people there's administrative friction and just decision fatigue of trying to shop for another option. But there's a threshold at which people will go shop and see what other options are, and then they will still have to weigh, do I want another option within the same carrier where I can keep my doctor, I can have the same network, or am I willing to change to a different carrier with maybe a reputation that I don't trust, or a completely different set of providers in their network that I have to change all of my doctors and maybe prescriptions, and it's a big administrative burden. But if
Yeah.
you
And
know
so
if the
it's
if
a
the
lot of
choice is
calculus.
between like paying $500 a month and $100 a month, that's obviously gonna be a big motivating factor. Um,
Yeah. And are you seeing, I think we have time for one more question. So I guess I'm curious, like, is there a big drop off between renewals or signups and then who actually starts paying their premiums, typically? Because that seems like it could be a huge
yeah,
problem this year.
I think it will be, and hopefully, I expect that carriers are proactively messaging, their renewals, to Go Shop, and that they are going to, if they're going from a $0 fully subsidized plan to having some amount of premium, even if it's small, that can be a big drop off in the members that sign up. I think if members are actively shopping and choosing a new plan, then they're expecting to have to pay that, and there's typically a way for them to make that binder first payment, uh, through the sign up process, or it's at least explained to them through the sign up process. But if they're just getting passively renewed onto their existing plan, and they're not sort of paying attention, or you know, possibly, I think there's a lot of confusion in the market, and in people's understanding of what it's even meaning, that the enhanced premium tax credits are going away, but not the base ACA, subsidies themselves. Um, so, I mean, that's an area where carriers really need to be doing a lot of messaging
Yeah. Well, that
and
makes a lot of
outreach.
sense. Yeah, and this was super informative. If people have questions or they're a carrier and they would like to work with you, where can they find you?
Yeah, I work for Evensun Health, and I'll, what's the best way for me to give my contact
I will
information?
I'll put the website, and then if you want
Okay,
I can put the LinkedIn
yeah.
your LinkedIn in the show
And
notes.
my email is rebecca@evensun.com. So that's
Perfect.
very, very easy, very straightforward.
Great. So if folks want to get in touch and get some advice on their ACA plans, she's the person to talk to. Well, thanks so much for your time and have a great rest of your day.
Great. Thank you.
Bye.